Okay, so we're live. It is, what's today, girls? It's Monday, September 20th, 2021. It's about 3:30 right now. My voice is a little hoarse. Sorry about that. I wanted to do an intro on a podcast series coming up on the miracles at the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so today we're going to go over Matthew 27. We're going to do this real brief. Matthew 27, verse 45. We'll start there. At noon, darkness fell across the whole land until 3 o'clock. At about 3 o'clock, Jesus called out with a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you abandoned me? And some of the bystanders misunderstood and thought he was calling for the prophet Elijah. One of them ran and filled a sponge with sour wine, holding it up to him on a reed stick so he could drink. But the rest said, wait, let's see whether Elijah comes to save him. So then Jesus shouts again and released his spirit. At that moment, the curtain in the sanctuary of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, rocks split apart, and tombs opened. The bodies of many godly men and women who had died were raised from the dead. They left the cemetery after Jesus' resurrection, went into the holy city of Jerusalem, and appeared to many people. The Roman officer and the other soldiers at the crucifixion were terrified by the earthquake and all that had happened. They said, this man truly was the Son of God. Now, this is a New Living Translation that I read from. Let's finish up. Sorry, verse 55. And many women who had come from Galilee with Jesus to care for him were watching from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of James and John, the sons of Zebedee. So we'll get into the rest, like the burial, Joseph of Arimathea, and some of those legends at another time. But for right now, let's go into some of the miracles at the death and resurrection of Jesus. First, there was darkness, right? From 12 o'clock, or what it calls the sixth hour, right? The 12 o'clock up until the ninth hour, or 3 o'clock. So 3 hours of darkness. So we know that it wasn't an eclipse because eclipse only lasts for a very short amount of time. And this is complete darkness. So then afterwards, Jesus dies, and what happens? The veil of the temple is ripped from top to bottom. Then the earth shook. There was an earthquake. Rocks split apart, and the tombs opened, and the bodies of these godly men and women, the saints, the righteous dead, they came back to life. And then after his resurrection, they went into the city. And finally, the last what you would call the miracle would be a miraculous conversion of this Roman soldier or centurion, this Roman officer, and whomever was around him, if they also confess Christ is the Son of God. So what we have here is quite interesting. We have darkness at noon fell across the whole land until 3 o'clock. Exodus 10, right? Exodus 10, verse 21. Then the Lord said to Moses, lift your hand toward heaven, and the land of Egypt will be covered with a darkness so thick you can feel it. And Moses lifted his hand to the sky, and a deep darkness covered the entire land of Egypt for 3 days. So with Jesus, you have 3 hours of darkness from noon until about 3 o'clock when he cried out finally, right? And he declares in another passage, it is finished, and he's done his work. Well, interestingly enough, and again, this is just a brief introduction to the podcast. So with that darkness, and in Amos, it also talks about, there's a passage in Amos that talks about darkness at noon, right? You see, so with this darkness in Egypt, you could actually feel it. And some scientists and some Bible scholars talk about it being possibly a sandstorm. But it also says in that sandstorm, in the plague, right, it says this too. Moses lifted his hand to the sky, and deep darkness covered the entire land of Egypt for 3 days. During all that time, the people could not see each other, and no one moved. But there was light, as usual, where the people of Israel lived. So if it were just a sandstorm, just an act of nature, a typical act of nature, though maybe unexpected, but not out of the realm of possibility, why was there light as usual where the people of Israel lived? And why did for instance, the angel pass over, right? The places, the dwelling places where they had the blood. So getting back to this, the curtain, the veil of the temple, right? So this is interesting too, because, all right, sorry, let's go back real fast, and we're going to end in just a couple of minutes, but you have basically the sky goes dark. So here's God shutting off the light of the sun. When Jesus is born, you have what would arguably call the new star in the sky. And again, some astronomers and scientists would argue that maybe it was a convergence of planets. But regardless, you have what the Bible calls a star signifying the birth of Jesus. And then you have a star going out, or at least the light of the star going out at his death, right? So when God turns his back on Jesus, when he has to turn his back on the sin that was put onto Christ, we have darkness. But it's interesting because there are two lights in the sky, one at his birth and one at his death, right? And the other interesting thing, the veil of the temple. Now Josephus describes it, and so do other Jewish sources, as being between 4 and 6 inches thick. So it's like, imagine like a big rug or carpet, like super thick, but it's 6 stories high, 60 feet high, 40 feet across, and a minimum of 4 inches thick. And it's torn. They said that yokes of oxen couldn't tear this thing apart. The temple is torn from two. The thing that kept everybody out, where only one person was allowed to go in one time per year, that being the high priest. The thing that kept everybody out was torn. The work was finished. God was no longer behind a veil and unapproachable. The earth shakes and the rocks split apart. The tombs open. I mean, imagine the resurrection like this. And what were they doing for those a few days that Jesus was when he was dead? Well, it says the bodies were raised from the dead, but they didn't leave the cemetery until after his resurrection. Could you imagine just masses of people coming, right? Masses of them in the tomb and showing up in the holy city in Jerusalem. So we'll get into this some more on other days, and we'll go into basically everything. I think each one deserves at minimum its own podcast. We'll be referencing other scriptures and things like that as well. The darkness in Amos, the darkness in Exodus, the darkness here, what that means. The darkness, right? In the beginning, God created heavens and the earth, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, right? Darkness. Exodus, you could feel the darkness. At least the Egyptians could. And here it's everybody. God says, well, my son has been rejected. And God himself had to turn his back. Peter wasn't with him. Peter had already denied him, right? There was really nobody really there, I believe, except for like John and a few of the others. And that's when Jesus said, behold your mother, right? Another passage, but we'll go into that as well. But just the miraculous elements here are pretty phenomenal. Well, they're miracles. I guess they should be. All right, well, hope some of you are interested in this, and hopefully it'll be a good podcast when it comes up. Sorry, I know I'm going really fast. I've got a few things to do, but I wanted to get something out there. All right, God bless you all. You take care.